Well, Adam, thank you for joining me today, and thank you for helping me reach my goals in my evaluator class. And I'm going to just take the time right now to let you know that I had several walkthroughs in your classroom, and I'm supposed to be using the 80-20 rule where you do 80% of talking and I do 20%, and I'm supposed to be doing lots of listening so you can reflect. But I want you to know that I'm gaining a few skills myself as we do this, and I'm hopefully helping you as a colleague to have more inquiry within your science classroom. And as we work together, I feel like I'm another set of eyes for you, and I feel that's what an instructional leader does for you. So to start off with, when you think back on the lesson that I reviewed, what do you feel like, what facts do you know about the students within that classroom? On that day when there was a really lot of mix-ups, the golf students left, the track students left, everything that we had planned together in the pre-observation fell apart. But what do you remember about the classroom makeup of that class?
Well, I have a number of kids at different ability levels, different social emotional levels, and that's more highlighted than their abilities. That day, I didn't have as much differentiation among the kids because many of the athletes were gone. I had a group that got there late, so in all the transition, I only ever had maybe 10 of the kids in there at a time. But the way they came and went in clusters, it made for a more uniform group of kids.
And I have to admit, you have quite a diverse population, because when I walked in, Sean was presenting to the class and he was making up an assignment, and you were literally pulling things out of him because he was supposed to do a research assignment. And how did you feel about your questioning concerning Sean at the very beginning of the class before you transitioned into your lesson for the day?
I was very disappointed when Sean gave his presentation, and he had slides that he just simply wanted to read from, and he didn't show any knowledge, any understanding. He just showed that he had pulled some information from probably a web resource, and he was regurgitating it. And when I asked him, first thing I did was I questioned him on the vocabulary terms to see if he understood what he was saying to me, and he did not. So then and he also had trouble reading the slides. He has a reading disability. So I started reading the slides for him and then questioning what he heard me say, thinking maybe if the problem is that he's not comprehending what he's reading, maybe he'll pick up and he'll be able to run with this. Maybe he does understand and it's the reading that's getting in the way. That didn't seem to be the case. So instead I switched it then to a modeling type lesson for him where I asked him to jump between his presentation and the original article that he was presenting. I read pieces of the article, and then I modeled for him what I would like to have seen him put on the presentation. And then after that, we did a little bit of practice. For example, he talked about changing some memories. I don't remember the exact vocabulary, but I remember using the example of if you get bit by a dog and you're afraid of a dog,
yes,
then what are you going to do to replace that memory with a better memory so that you can remove that phobia? And it took a little bit of teaching for him to understand his own presentation, but by the end of it, I hope what he took from it was, this is how you pull information from a reading. This is how you pull information out of a text and then present it to others in a meaningful way.
And I like that metaphor that you used with him, what you remembered about the dog. Well, as a result, then you transitioned right away into your lesson for the day, which was a powerful vocabulary review because you told the kids we have to transition. But when I came in, you were planning on having me do tally marks for what females you talked to, what males, and then how much you made your trips around the room. And I have a little artifact right here that shows how you reached out, and I numbered it. This was your first stop. This was your second stop. So we're up to 35 stops within that 30-minute period. So you were seeing everyone, and you can see in this that you hit every single student that was left. But for some reason, you seem to engage the guys more than the girls.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you notice about that? Because I know the caliber of girls that left and the caliber of girls that were left behind in that. So how might you look at that?
I don't recall which girls were left, but I know that there were only a couple of them. And I thought about it as I was drawing the popsicle sticks to call on them. I noticed there's no girls in here. There's no girls being drawn. Tell me again what you noticed. You noticed that
You honed in on the guys. I felt like you were engaged with the guys and you had lots of relationship with the guys, but Casey was left behind.
Okay.
And she struggles with looking at you, and she's one of our at-risk kids.
Yeah.
Yet you seem to be engaged with the guys, but then I think they're fascinated with your science class. But then you went to the pop sticks, which was a great strategy. Yeah. Why did you go to the pop sticks?
Okay, it helps when you use names. So Casey does not respond, I don't get a sense that she responds well to close proximity. And there are a couple of kids that are that way. Curtis would be another. Mm-hmm. And they respond as if they're in trouble, as if they're shying away. So I probably even subconsciously sometimes avoid them when I shouldn't. And so I'm sure it's no surprise to hear that I was shying away from those areas. I switched to the popsicle sticks because then it takes out the human emotion impact. It's random. It makes it must be fair. There's no discretion on my part. It's in its purest form.
Well, as you reflect, you know that the goal of effective instruction is student growth. And just like my goal of professional development is planning ahead and teacher growth. We can all grow from our experiences, even though you and I may be both science teachers. You come from a higher academic level where I come from a middle school level. And I know that you want to grow and maximize your potential. And as we look at these 8 standards and 42 criteria, what do you perceive when it comes to just your overall teaching? Because you wanted me to emphasize Standard 4 and Standard 5, using strategies to deliver instruction that meets the multiple learning needs. And Standard 5, use a variety of methods to monitor student learning. So I saw the popsicle sticks. That was very obvious to me. I also saw you traveling around the room and I saw you tap kids when you thought they were off task. What other strategies do you feel you deliver when it comes to instruction for multiple learning needs?
Okay, specific to those standards, I try to hit 3 different types of intelligence from throughout the lessons. So maybe we've got a visual learner, maybe it's auditory, maybe it's kinesthetic. There's so many different abilities within those kids. They're so different, and they're so mixed in their proficiency that the primary thing I try to do is show it to them a number of ways. Sean can see it. You didn't see in that classroom, but in another classroom, I have a boy who you can say anything to him, and he has it's almost a superhuman ability to comprehend what he's being told and process it. And I can give him I can take the most complicated text and read it to him. I'm not even comprehending what I'm reading, but he will explain back to me what I said. And so we didn't see as much of it in this unit or in this lesson because of the coming and the going of the kids, that we didn't have really, like you said at the beginning, we just made the best of what we had. A streamlined lesson from the beginning to the end. It jumped around so much that you didn't get to see the different types of teaching strategies that hit the different intelligences along the way.
Mm-hmm. And then on Standard 5, you emphasize using a variety of methods to monitor student learning. And you've told me about your proficiency scales. You've told me
Yes.
about your summatives. You told me about your formatives. Can you elaborate about?
Right. Well, we use standards-based grading, and the kids are only really scored on their summative assessments. But with that, formative assessment becomes very, very important. And
Well, Adam, thank you for joining me today, and thank you for helping me reach my goals in my.
All right. So I was talking about the importance of formative assessment. You have to, when you're only putting in the grade book, one score at the very end of the unit, you have to be able to score, or you have to be able to tell where kids are going day to day and have a way to track that. So go back to the question.
I was just asking you about your
it's formative, or the different ways of assessing
yes.
and monitoring. So whether it be exit tickets or Q&A or fist to 5, we just use a lot of formative assessments along the way.
Okay. So what it sounds like, you mentioned formative assessments, you mentioned summative assessments, you mentioned standards-based grading. And when I came here, I thought East Union did really well with standards-based grading, but what are you noticing now that you're into standards-based grading in the third year? How do you feel the overall structure within the classroom is standards-based grading doing for your kids?
I'm not pleased with what I'm seeing. Our kids are losing their study skills. They're losing their intrinsic motivation. I never was a big fan of extrinsic motivation, just because when I was in school, we were taught that it's only limited in its effectiveness, but that's the only thing that we have left, and even that, we're limited in what we have. I'm seeing a lot of apathy because nothing seems to matter to the kids day to day until the very end. So then the teachers are left trying to make more of the formative assessment, but when the kids aren't putting the effort into that formative assessment, you're left with bad data, because if they're not coming to play, you can't assess their skills.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's interesting that you think that you're concerned about standards-based grading, yet your kids are alive when you do in the inquiry process within science. And so I just want to have you touch on what concerns do you have about the inquiry process when it comes to maybe students collecting their own data or showing growth in understanding what they're seeing because I've been in there in several walkthroughs when you're doing the forces unit, and then you were doing watts and power and all these different things, and you make them do a graph whenever they do the inquiry. What are you noticing about their growth when it comes to reading graphs?
Well, like anything, the more practice makes perfect. What I'm finding that surprises me is in the inquiry, there's something very powerful in that, and it gives us the ability to work on the soft skills. And what's so ironic about that is standards-based grading has pulled this away from the soft skills and said you will focus on these standards, put a laser focus on this. But now in the inquiry, I'm able to focus on what's being lost, and that's those soft skills that make them successful in all areas, no matter the standards that they're focused on. When I start a lesson and I focus on the soft skills, I get farther into the standard and see more progress from the kids than when I start a lesson and focus on the standards. And inquiry is very powerful in that way.
And you had mentioned that, and that leads me into this question: which activities or actions do you think foster high involvement? That would be your inquiry collection of data days.
Right, and so now we've switched our many of our summative assessments, even because that's where 100% of their credit comes from. We've switched a lot of their summative assessments to performance tasks that require the inquiry. It's hands-on, project-based rather than a traditional written assessment.
Which brings me to your questioning techniques, because on that day that I came in, you were firing questions, and then you said to the students, okay, you have to tie your concept to your previous concept to your word, and you're just pulling out words like watts, power, joules, just all these different words. So when you notice how they had to tie information to previous information, I thought it was unique how you came up with that on the spot.
It adds another layer of rigor for kids. Every kid in the room every child, every student should be challenged. And some of those questions I was asking were very basic because they were review, and vocabulary is lower level. And many of the kids needed a higher level of rigor, and not many, but a handful. And so I could ask the same question to all of the kids, but I could demand higher rigor from different students without anybody in the class being aware that there was a difference in the questions being asked.
And I noticed how you paraphrased the kids. They would give the answer, and then you would also help them paraphrase, and then it would roll into the next kid, which I thought was a very nice strategy. What strategies could you have done or could you try to increase when it comes to positive behaviors about note-taking? Because there are kids that you expected note-taking in that class, and there were kids that were writing down notes, and then there are kids that were just, and you said engagement is a tough one.
It is, and I've tried a lot of things. I tried saying that they could use their notes on quizzes, but quizzes don't matter so much anymore, so they lost that incentive. Once in a while, we'll do a level 3 and 4 part of the test. Then when they can open their notes and do the level 2 part of the test, and then they get to use it right then. I try to explain to the kids that with the notes they'll be able to study more efficiently, but again, studying is becoming a more and more foreign word to them, which is why notes are becoming more and more foreign to them. And any way that we can, anytime that we can get that student accountability, it's great. And I don't feel like it's a battle that I'm winning.
Yeah. And I understand that because I know that the social emotional, we talked at length about the social emotional challenges that come through our classrooms and what you're trying to do when it comes to voice and when it comes to, you mentioned it with Casey. So what are some other social emotional things?
I noticed that the middle school teacher is really good with the kids that I struggle more with, and it's because of their backgrounds and the social emotional issues that they have. And if you listen to her speak, there's a calmness to her voice. There is a acceptance to her voice. She speaks to them actually. I spoke to them like adults, and they weren't ready for that. They're children, and they needed to, this freshman level needed to be spoken to like children. And if you walk through the middle school hall, you can see a big divide between the teachers who are successful with children that can be very, very difficult, and the teachers who are not so successful. And one thing that I noticed was the tone in which they speak to the children. It is soft. It is welcoming. It is like a grandmother talking to a young child. And so that's something that I've tried to take on more, just to be more approachable to these kids, because they are very fragile, and every risk they take makes them vulnerable in ways that I don't understand. Risk to them is danger, where risk to me could be adventure.
Well, I can't help but think, you're constantly trying to learn, and when it comes to your summer focus, I know that you're constantly trying to get more things in your toolbox that will work for kids. So when it comes to maybe standards-based learning or standards-based teaching or engagement strategies, what do you look forward to possibly this summer when it comes to adding to your toolbox of success?
All right, well, I'm going to take some coursework, some graduate level coursework, and try to gather some ideas from there. I started looking into how other schools are doing standards-based grading, and maybe we can borrow some ideas from successes and failures of other schools, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel where where they found ways that work. And those are my two primary ways to move forward and prepare for next year.
Well, I can't help but think as a district, how can we ensure success? Because I know that you received some compliments from college kids that are being successful right now. You mentioned the Riley girl and getting notes back about how well they're prepared for biology or chemistry and how well they're doing. Yet we have to take the whole masses. So how might we as a district ensure future success or prevent future failure for students so they maybe look at college or a trade school? Or what are you thinking that we might be able to do, or what are your next steps or actions that you might take so kids aren't triggered or frustrated or give up? Or what supports can we put in place as a district, or that we can put in place for you to help you become more successful?
I need the freedom to maneuver. I need the freedom to use discretion. I need the freedom to search for tools and use the tools without being limited in the ways that I teach, in the ways that I assess. I need to be trusted as a professional to go into the classroom and do what's best for the kids. And I need to be able to take risks. And I haven't always been able to take the types of risks that I want, probably because every failure that I meet and every failure that a student meets is on my shoulders. Mm-hmm. And I want to be able to make mistakes, learn from them, and move on. And I feel like I'm limited in my ability to take those risks.
So when we put together your growth plan for next year, we do this as a team, and we're just looking at this right now. And there's lots of things there's lots of standards when I look at, and we concentrated on strategies and so on. But if we were to build your growth plan for next fall, where would you want us to match up the most? What standard? Would you still like strategies and engagement strategies, or are you thinking about other things that you might?
I feel like we've got an environment where rather than the teacher guiding where we go, like we've talked about our social emotional issues, the limitations of the kids are determining our direction, and they say, rising tide rises all boats, and so does a falling tide. And I want to create an environment of mutual respect, setting high communication, or communicating high expectations for kids. That I'd like to be able to communicate them in a way that they'll accept them and not grow rejected as something that's scary, but something that they can be a part of. And I'd like to be able to figure out a way to pull those kids in and make them understand that they're as much a part of the culture and the climate as I am, and if we can work together, that we will grow together.
It's like that simple hat coming through the door. A lot of kids say it's $3.15, yet I understand what you mean. It's the manner, it's the politeness, it's the etiquette, it's the right thing to do because of the older generation. Mm-hmm. And it's a mutual respect thing that's on them, but it's also on us. And I think that's good, but the social economic and the ACEs, the new training that we're rolling out the last 2 days of school, I think will help us, and I think it'll help you. I also think it'll create a goal of rapport and fairness, but I hope that you'll continue to develop your toolbox in strategies, and I like that to be your goal. And even if we could have more inquiry-based lessons, I think that would be enhanced if you could tie those to your proficiency and your formatives to turn them into summatives. I think that would be awesome. Well, thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you.